Welcome to episode 107 of Real Health Radio. You can find the links talked about as part of this episode in the show notes, which is www.7, so the word all spelled out, seven health.com/107.
Welcome to Real Health Radio. Health advice that's more than just about how you look. And here's your host, Chris Sandel.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Real Health Radio. I'm your host, Chris Sandel. So on this week's show, it's another guest interview, and my guest today is Dr. Kathryn Clancy. So she is an Associate Professor of Anthropology at the University of Illinois with additional affiliations in the Program for Evolution, Ecology and Conservation, the Beckham Institute for Advanced Science and Technology, and Women and Gender in Global Perspectives. Her research integrates life history, evolutionary medicine, and feminist biology to contest clinical definitions of normal in women's health. And she has a significant online presence with her popular Twitter feed at Kate Clancy, a website and blog which is www.kateclancy.com, and a podcast about women's health in its second season called Period Podcast. And she also has 2 daughters, 2 pets, and a roller derby addiction. So I first became aware of Kate as I heard her interviewed on the Untamed podcast. So this is a podcast hosted by Lou Ulrich, who I've had on the show before. And I then started listening to Kate's Period podcast and really enjoyed it. And it wasn't talking just about periods from a biological perspective, but looking at how they're affected by culture or different places around the world, or talking to kids about their understanding of periods and what they know. So I started working my way back through Kate's blog and also liked what I saw. And so I then reached out to her to have her on the podcast, which actually took quite a while because she had a baby and then I had a baby, or at least my partner had a baby. So it was nice to finally get a chance to chat. So there were 2 main areas that we cover as part of the show. So the first is looking at the differences in women's reproductive fertility and reproductive experiences, and how this is different at different parts or in different parts of the world. So Kate's done a number of years field work in rural Poland, and we use this to talk about and compare with more westernized countries in the US or the UK, for example. And the second area that we cover is to do with women working in science and their experience. So over the last couple of months, we've had revelations come out about people like Harvey Weinstein and Kevin Spacey and Louis C.K., and now we're seeing the same allegations against lots of politicians. Well, the sciences aren't free from this either, and it's something that Kate's been doing research on for many years now. So given it's quite topical right now, it was really nice to be able to chat with someone who's been doing this research and trying to raise the alarm for quite a long time. So those are the 2 broad areas that we cover. And this was my first interview back after quite a long hiatus. And I won't lie, I definitely felt rusty. I'm really happy with what we covered, and Kate definitely held up her side of the conversation. I just feel it'll take a little longer for me to get back into the groove. So with this intro out of the way, let's get on with the show. Here is my interview with Dr. Kathryn Clancy. Hey Kate, welcome to Real Health Radio. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me.
So I want to say that I'm a big fan of your podcast, the Period Podcast. So a lot of what I want to talk about today is women's health stuff. The other area I'd like to chat a little about is to do with women in science, or more broadly, women in STEM, so science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. It's something I know you're passionate about and are doing research on. So broadly, those are the 2 areas that I want to cover. But to start with, do you want to give people a bit of background on yourself? So can you talk about the different training and qualifications you have, and also just describe your day-to-day and what that looks like?
Sure. So I am an Associate Professor of Anthropology at the University of Illinois. And as an anthropologist, our training is really variable. I mean, everyone who ends up in a faculty job has to get a PhD, but sort of how they get there after that point changes. So for me, I got my PhD at Yale in 2007. And I had a preceptor teaching position. I was an expository writing teacher, actually, of college freshmen, which was really challenging, but also really fun. And then right after that is when I started the job that I'm in right now. And I went through sort of the probationary pre-tenure process and then got tenure a couple of years ago. The kind of work that I do requires that I do both laboratory and field work. So I've spent a couple of summers in rural Poland. So one of the things we anthropologists like to do is understand variation across humans. So I thought it would be useful to look at an agricultural population, one that is not necessarily so different from industrialized societies, more urban societies, because I wanted to be able to do ultrasounds and stuff like that, but still different enough that their lifestyles were different so I could see measurable differences in physiology. So I spent some time in rural Poland, and then I also, because I study hormones, have to do a lot of work in the lab. So I'm also trained to run radioimmunoassays. And now my students actually do a type of assay that I have run maybe once or twice in my entire life, and those are enzyme immunoassays. It's mostly writing grants and training my own students instead of doing much of that type of work on my own.
One of the things I looked at before getting you on here, I went through your CV and I had a look at your training. And what I think is really interesting is you have an interest in biology, so how the body functions, as well as behavior, so why people do what they do. And it seems, from my perspective, like a really good match to be able to understand both sides of that. So I just wanted to find out, how common is it that people do both of these things? And do you find that they complement each other really well, especially given the kind of studies that you're looking at or what you're trying to do?
Yeah, that's a great question. Within biological anthropology, which is really the study of the evolutionary biology of humans, it can vary from folks who are interested in paleoanthros, they like to dig up fossils, to folks who want to understand us in a comparative context, so they study primates, to folks who, like me, are really interested in the environmental determinants of sort of the human body, to more of the genetic determinants. So that would be like a molecular anthropologist. And then within all of those fields, I think there's really varying interest in how much culture or sociality affects the body. I would definitely put myself in the camp of someone who thinks that's really important. And I think that interest is growing. For a long time, people thought, cultural anthropology and biological anthropology are two very distinct things. They're two very distinct things. And in fact, they fight a lot and don't like each other very much. And cultural anthropologists are really postmodern, and talk so much about cultural relativism that there's nothing knowable. And biological anthropologists are so deterministic, and we tell everybody, well, this is how the body works, period. And I really think that that's an old way of thinking about the field and an old way of thinking about the body, that culture and biology are somehow these really discrete things. So there are a lot of people now who consider themselves more biocultural anthropologists, or even if they're just biological anthropologists, they just care a lot more about social context and how that affects things like behavior and physiology and function. In my work, I study periods and endometrial function, that's the lining of the uterus, ovarian follicular dynamics. Increasingly, I really feel like the social context is crucial to understanding how all of that stuff works, especially in societies like ours that are industrialized. We sit on our butts most of the time. We're well fed. So it's not really that we're living hand to mouth and that energetics are playing a huge role in our biology. Now it's actually the really big determinant in our environment that matters is how we interact with each other.
And one of the things you already mentioned it. You said you've done some field work in rural Poland. I mean, have you done other field work? I mean, when I think about field work and think about the term biological anthropologist, it conjures up images of you going in and living in like some tribe and making notes. So have you ever done anything like that?